An elderly couple's dream vacation booking led them to a mountain lodge everyone had abandoned for 40 years. But when they pushed open those heavy wooden doors, what waited inside wasn't just dust and silence. It was the beginning of the most dangerous discovery of their lives. Before we dive into this story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. Marlena Rivers had never been the impulsive type. 72 years of living had taught her that patience, planning, and a carefully balanced checkbook were the pillars of a good life. She'd spent 4 decades teaching elementary school in a modest town outside Portland, Oregon, watching generations of children learn to read, to add, to dream. Her husband, Dorian, 74 and retired from teaching high school history, was cut from the same practical cloth. Together, they'd built a life of quiet routine, Sunday crosswords, Thursday bingo at the community center, and annual trips to the coast where they'd rent the same cabin and watch the same waves break against the same rocks. But this year was different. Dorian's health scare back in March, nothing serious in the end, just a flutter in his heart that the doctors said was manageable, had shaken something loose in both of them. Marlena remembered sitting in that sterile hospital waiting room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, hands folded in her lap and thinking about all the places they'd never seen. All the adventures they'd postponed for someday. Someday when they had more money. Someday when they had more time. Someday when the stars aligned just right. She'd looked up at the clock on the wall, watched the second hand tick forward, relentless and uncaring, and made a decision. There would be no more some days. That night, after Dorian came home with a clean bill of health and a prescription for baby aspirin, Marlena pulled out her laptop. The old Dell they'd bought 6 years ago, the one that took 5 minutes to boot up and made a sound like a small airplane preparing for takeoff. She opened a browser and typed into the search bar, "Remote Mountain Lodge Vacation Rental Budget." She scrolled through pages of generic listings, cookie-cutter cabins with hot tubs and Wi-Fi, until something caught her eye. The listing was sparse, almost primitive compared to the others. No professional photos, just one grainy image of a massive timber lodge nestled against a mountain peak surrounded by dense forest. The description was equally minimal. Whitmore Peak Lodge, secluded mountain retreat, no frills, no crowds, just peace, 7 nights, $200. Marlena blinked at the screen. $200 for a week? Most places were charging that per night. She clicked through, expecting to find a catch, some fine print about shared bathrooms or no running water. But there was nothing, just a booking form and an email address. She should have been suspicious. She should have researched reviews, checked ratings, maybe even Googled the property name. But something about that grainy photograph, the way the lodge seemed to rise from the mountain itself like it had grown there naturally, called to something deep in her chest. A whisper of adventure, a hint of mystery. She filled out the form. 3 weeks later, they were loading their sensible Honda Civic with 2 suitcases, a cooler full of sandwiches Marlena had made that morning, and a road atlas because Dorian didn't trust GPS in the mountains. The confirmation email had been brief, almost curt. "Your reservation is confirmed. Arrive after 3 p.m. The door will be open." Directions were attached as a PDF, hand-drawn on what looked like notebook paper, complete with little sketched trees and a compass rose in the corner. "This feels like the beginning of a horror movie," Dorian had joked as they pulled out of their driveway, but his eyes had been bright with something Marlena hadn't seen in years. Excitement. The drive took them deeper into the Cascade Range than they'd ever ventured. The highway gave way to state roads, which gave way to county routes, which eventually gave way to a dirt logging road that wound up the mountain in tight switchbacks. The trees grew thicker, taller, blocking out the afternoon sun until they were driving through a tunnel of green shadow. Marlena's phone lost signal first, then Dorian's. The GPS on the dashboard blinked once, twice, then displayed a message: no satellite connection. "Well, Dorian said, unfolding the printed directions across his lap. Guess we're doing this old school. They drove in silence for another 40 minutes, following the hand-drawn map, counting turnoffs, watching for landmarks. A fallen log shaped like a horseshoe, a boulder split down the middle by a pine tree, a creek that crossed the road 3 times in the span of a mile. And then, as they rounded a bend where the trees finally thinned, they saw it. Whitmore Peak Lodge rose from a rocky outcropping like something out of a forgotten era. 3 stories of dark timber and stone, with a massive peaked roof that seemed designed to shed the weight of heavy mountain snow. Windows, tall and arched, reflected the late afternoon sky in shades of gold and violet. 2 stone chimneys jutted from either end of the structure, and a wide wraparound porch extended across the front, complete with rocking chairs and hanging planters, though no flowers grew in them now. It was beautiful, stunning even, but it was also completely, utterly deserted. Marlena felt her stomach tighten as Dorian pulled the car into a gravel lot beside the lodge. There were no other vehicles, no signs of life. The windows were dark, the porch empty. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "Maybe we're the only guests," Dorian offered, but his voice carried a note of uncertainty. They stepped out of the car into air so crisp and clean it almost hurt to breathe. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant call of a bird and the soft whisper of wind through pine needles. Marlena pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders and looked up at the lodge. Something about it felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, just wrong. Like finding a museum open at midnight or walking into a library where all the books were backwards on the shelves. Dorian grabbed their suitcases from the trunk, and together they approached the front steps. The wood creaked under their weight, old but solid. At the top of the stairs, the massive double doors stood before them, carved with intricate patterns of mountains and trees, and there, tucked into the door handle, was a piece of paper. Marlena pulled it free and unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned, written in fountain pen ink that had bled slightly into the paper's fibers. "Welcome, Marlena and Dorian Rivers. Make yourselves at home. The lodge is yours for the week. Everything you need is inside. Enjoy the solitude. No signature, no instructions. Just those few lines." Dorian tried the door. It swung open smoothly, well-oiled hinges making no sound. Warm air rolled out to meet them, carrying the scent of wood smoke and something else. Something Marlena couldn't quite place. Cinnamon, maybe, or cedar. They stepped inside. The great room took Marlena's breath away. Vaulted ceilings soared overhead, supported by massive timber beams dark with age. A stone fireplace dominated the far wall, large enough to stand inside, with logs already stacked and ready to light. Leather furniture, worn but well-maintained, was arranged in conversation circles. The floor was polished hardwood, covered here and there with thick wool rugs in deep reds and blues. And everywhere on every wall were photographs, black and white images in ornate frames showing the lodge in what must have been its heyday. Groups of people in 1950s clothing standing on the porch, raising glasses in toast. Couples dancing in this very room, a band visible in the corner, children playing on the lawn outside, a golden retriever running between them. "It's like a time capsule," Dorian murmured, setting down the suitcases and walking slowly into the room. Marlena followed, her eyes moving from photo to photo. Everyone in the pictures looked so happy, so vibrant. The lodge had clearly been a destination once, a place where people came to celebrate, to gather, to make memories. But when had it closed, and why? She walked to a side table where a leather-bound guest book lay open. The pages were yellowed with age, covered in signatures and comments written in various hands. She flipped back through them, reading snippets. June 1978. Best anniversary trip we've ever taken. The fishing is phenomenal. Robert and Nancy. August 1979. Our children had the time of their lives. We'll treasure these memories forever. The Goldman Family. March 1982. This place is magic. We'll be back next year. Patricia. Marlena kept turning pages, watching the dates progress. 1982, 1983. And then, halfway down a page dated September 1983, the entries stopped. Not at the end of a page, not at a natural breaking point. Just stopped. Mid-page. The last entry read, September 23, 1983. Arrived this morning. Weather is perfect. The views are... and nothing else. The sentence hung unfinished. The rest of the page blank. The rest of the book blank. Dorian, Marlena called softly. Come look at this. He joined her, peering over her shoulder at the abrupt ending. His finger traced the final words. That's odd. More than odd. It's like everyone just left, all at once. They explored further. The kitchen was immaculate, vintage appliances from the 1970s and 80s gleaming as if they'd been polished yesterday. The pantry was stocked with canned goods. Marlena checked the dates, all from the 1980s. Tomato soup from 1982, green beans from 1983, peaches from 1981. None of it spoiled, all of it perfectly preserved in the dry mountain air. The electricity worked. The water ran clear and cold from the taps. The heat was on, keeping the lodge at a comfortable temperature despite the autumn chill outside. Someone's been maintaining this place, Dorian said. The dust alone should be inches thick, but look. He ran his finger along a windowsill. It came away clean. But where are they? Where's the staff? The owners? They found their room on the second floor, a spacious suite with a four-poster bed, a writing desk positioned before a window that looked out over endless forest, and a bathroom with a clawfoot tub that made Marlena's back ache just thinking about it in a good way. Their names were on a small placard on the door. The attention to detail was unnerving. Whoever had prepared for their arrival had known exactly where to put them, had known they were coming, had set everything up perfectly, and then disappeared. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple visible through the tall windows, Marlena and Dorian stood in the great room, uncertain. The lodge was theirs, apparently. The note had said so, but the wrongness of it all, the pristine preservation, the sudden abandonment in 1983, the fact that they seemed to be completely alone, pressed down on Marlena's shoulders like a physical weight. "Should we leave?" she asked quietly. Dorian was silent for a long moment, looking around the room. Then he shook his head. "We paid for the week. And honestly, Marlena, when will we ever have another chance at something like this? A whole lodge to ourselves? Whatever happened here, it happened over 40 years ago. We're probably just overthinking it." Marlena wanted to agree, wanted to shake off the unease and enjoy their vacation. But as the darkness crept in from outside and the lodge's shadows grew longer, she couldn't quite manage it. They ate sandwiches from their cooler for dinner, neither of them willing to cook in that too-perfect kitchen with its too-old canned goods. Afterward, Dorian built a fire in the great room's massive fireplace, and they sat in the leather chairs, listening to the wood pop and crackle, watching the flames dance. "I'm going to explore a bit," Marlena announced, standing and brushing crumbs from her lap. "Maybe find a book to read." "Don't get lost," Dorian said with a smile, but his eyes followed her as she left the warm circle of firelight. Marlena walked through the lodge's first floor, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood. She found a library, shelves floor to ceiling packed with books, many of them first editions from what she could tell. A game room with a pool table, the felt still tight and clean. A sunroom with wicker furniture and windows on 3 sides, though now those windows showed only darkness. And then, in the main hallway near the back of the lodge, she found the door. It was different from all the others. While every other door in the lodge was made of simple wood with brass handles, this one was heavy oak, almost black with age, and covered in carvings. Marlena stepped closer, running her fingers over the intricate designs. They were symbols, she realized. Not decorative patterns, but actual symbols. Some she recognized from Dorian's history books, old Nordic runes, alchemical signs. Others were completely foreign to her. She tried the handle. Locked. Of course it was locked. This was probably just a storage closet or a maintenance room. Nothing mysterious, nothing sinister. Just a locked door that the owners, whoever they were, didn't want guests opening. But Marlena couldn't shake the feeling that this door was important, that behind it lay answers to the questions that had been building in her mind since they'd arrived. She was about to walk away when something caught her eye. The stones that made up the wall beside the door, they weren't quite flush. One of them, about waist-high, protruded just slightly more than the others. Marlena pressed on it. Nothing happened. She tried pushing it to the side. Still nothing. Then, almost on instinct, she gripped it with both hands and pulled. The stone slid free with a grinding sound that made her wince. Behind it was a hollow space, and inside that space, resting on a bed of what looked like old silk, was a key. It was large, old-fashioned, made of iron that had been blackened with age. The head of the key was decorated with the same symbols that covered the door. Marlena's heart hammered in her chest. Every rational part of her brain screamed to put the key back, to replace the stone, to walk away and forget she'd ever found it. But another part, the part that had booked this strange lodge in the first place, the part that had always wondered what lay beyond the edges of her careful, planned life, reached out and took the key. It was cold in her palm, heavier than it looked. She walked back to the great room where Dorian still sat by the fire, absorbed in a book he'd found. "Dorian," she said, and something in her voice made him look up immediately. "I found something." She showed him the key, explained about the door, about the symbols, about the hidden hollow in the wall. Dorian set down his book and stood, his historian's curiosity clearly piqued. "Show me," he said. They walked together to the door. In the dim hallway light, the carvings seemed to shift and move, though Marlena knew it was just shadows playing tricks. She held up the key. "We don't have to open it," Dorian said, but he was leaning forward, examining the symbols with eager eyes. "It's probably just a storage room." "Probably," Marlena agreed. "Or it could be private, something the owners didn't want guests seeing." "Could be. We should respect their privacy." "We should." They looked at each other. Marlena saw her own curiosity reflected in Dorian's eyes, mixed with apprehension and something else. Excitement. The same excitement she'd seen when they'd started this drive. "On the other hand," Dorian said slowly, "we are paying guests, and if there's something dangerous in there, we should probably know about it, for safety reasons." Marlena smiled despite herself. "Safety reasons, right." She slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly, as she'd known it would. When she turned it, the mechanism inside the door, old and unused for who knew how long, groaned in protest. But it turned, and with a heavy click that seemed to echo through the entire lodge, the lock disengaged. Marlena pulled the door open. Behind it was not a storage room, not a closet, not any kind of room at all. Behind it was a staircase hewn directly into the mountain stone, descending into absolute darkness. The stairs were steep, narrow, and vanished into shadows that their hallway light couldn't penetrate. Cold air rolled up from below, carrying a scent of earth and minerals and something else, something metallic. Marlena and Dorian stood at the threshold, staring down into that darkness. "Okay," Dorian said quietly. "That's not normal." "No," Marlena agreed. "That's definitely not normal. We could close the door, lock it back up, pretend we never found it." "We could." Neither of them moved to close the door. Dorian pulled out his phone, remembered it had no signal, but the flashlight still worked. He turned it on, shining the beam down the stairs. The light illuminated maybe 20 steps before being swallowed by the darkness below. "How deep do you think it goes?" Marlena asked. "Only one way to find out. Dorian, we can't just go down there. We don't know what's down there. It could be dangerous. The stairs could collapse. There could be animals. Bears hibernate in caves, don't they?" "It's not hibernation season yet," Dorian said, which was not the reassurance Marlena was looking for. "We should wait until morning, get proper flashlights, maybe even, I don't know, call someone." "Call who? We don't have cell service, remember? And Marlena, come on. You know we're going to go down there eventually. We're both too curious not to, so we can do it now, together, while we're thinking clearly. Or we can do it at 3 in the morning, when the mystery has eaten away at our sleep and our judgment is compromised." Marlena hated that he was right, hated and loved it in equal measure. "Just a quick look," she said. "We go down, see what's there, and come right back up." "Just a quick look," Dorian agreed. Marlena went back to their room and grabbed the small flashlight she always packed, along with her sweater. When she returned, Dorian had found a larger flashlight in the kitchen and was testing it, shining it down the stairs again. "Ready?" he asked. Marlena took a deep breath. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice that sounded suspiciously like her mother's was screaming at her to stop, to turn around, to leave this lodge and never look back. But she'd spent 72 years listening to that voice, being careful, being safe, being sensible. Just this once, she wanted to know what lay beyond the careful boundaries of her life. "Ready," she said. Dorian went first, one hand on the rough stone wall for balance, the other holding his flashlight. Marlena followed close behind, her own light adding to his, pushing back the darkness. The stairs were steep but solid, carved directly from the mountain's living stone. Someone had put enormous effort into creating this. Whoever had built it hadn't been careless or rushed. This was intentional, planned, permanent. They descended in silence, counting steps. 20, 40, 60. The air grew colder with each step, and the scent of minerals grew stronger. Marlena could hear water somewhere far off, a faint dripping echo. At step 112, the stairs ended. They stood at the threshold of a space their flashlight beams couldn't fully illuminate. The darkness here was profound, absolute, untouched by any light source for what must have been decades. Dorian swept his flashlight in an arc, and Marlena felt her breath catch. They were standing at the entrance to a massive underground chamber, carved into the heart of the mountain. The ceiling arched overhead, lost in shadows. The walls stretched out beyond the reach of their lights, and in the center of the space, illuminated in pieces as Dorian's flashlight panned across it, was something that made Marlena's knees weak. Rows and rows of metal shelves, and on those shelves, stacked, organized, catalogued, was wealth beyond anything Marlena had ever imagined. Gold bars gleamed in the flashlight beam, stacked like cordwood. Paintings in protective coverings leaned against the shelves. She could see the edges of ornate frames, the hints of oil paint on canvas, wooden crates with foreign writing stenciled on their sides, glass cases containing, Marlena stepped closer, squinting, jewelry, museum-quality pieces sparkling even in the dim light. Sculptures, small but exquisite, sat on their own dedicated shelves. Bearer bonds in neat stacks, held together with rubber bands that had long since lost their elasticity. Stocks and certificates in protective folders. And everywhere, covering nearly every surface, were ledgers and documents and files. "Dorian!" Marlena whispered, because speaking any louder in this space felt wrong, felt dangerous. "What is this place?" Dorian didn't answer. He was moving deeper into the vault, his flashlight beam dancing over the collected wealth like a searchlight over an ocean of treasure. Marlena followed, her mind reeling. This wasn't just valuable. This was historically significant. Some of these paintings, even in their protective coverings, she recognized the style, if not the specific pieces, could be worth millions. The gold alone, she tried to estimate how many bars there were and gave up, had to be worth tens of millions. They found a desk against the far wall, large and heavy, made of dark wood. On it sat an oil lamp, and beside the lamp, boxes of matches. With trembling hands, Marlene struck a match and lit the lamp. Warm yellow light bloomed, pushing back the darkness, revealing even more than their flashlights had shown. The vault was enormous, easily the size of the great room above, probably larger, and it was organized with obsessive precision. Each shelf was labeled, each item catalogued. This wasn't a random collection. This was curated, protected, preserved. On the desk, Marlene found a journal. The leather cover was embossed with initials C.W. She opened it carefully, the spine creaking with age. The first entry was dated March 15, 1953, and it was written in the same elegant handwriting that had welcomed them on the note upstairs. Began construction on the vault today. The chamber was already here, a natural cave that needed only minimal expansion. Perfect for my purposes, perfect for keeping safe what others would destroy or steal or squander. I have spent my life helping men hide their wealth, and now I will hide my own, not for greed, but for preservation. The world is changing too fast. Things of beauty are being lost. I will not let that happen here. Marlene looked up at Dorian, who had found his own journal, a more recent one by the look of it, and was reading with an expression of growing horror. "Marlene," he said quietly, "I think we need to read these very carefully, because unless I'm very much mistaken, we've just stumbled onto one of the biggest—" A sound from above cut him off, distant but distinct, the sound of the lodge's front door opening and closing. They weren't alone anymore. Marlene's hand flew to the lamp, extinguishing it with a quick breath. Darkness crashed back over them like a wave. Dorian grabbed her arm, his grip tight, and they stood frozen in the absolute blackness of the vault, listening. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving across the floor above them. Not the hurried steps of someone looking for something. These were measured, careful. The footsteps of someone who knew exactly where they were going. "The door," Marlene breathed, barely audible. "Did we close it?" Dorian's silence was answer enough. They'd left the carved oak door open, left it standing wide with the staircase exposed for anyone to see. And now someone was up there, walking through the lodge, and it was only a matter of time before they found it. The footsteps moved closer. Marlene could track them through the ceiling, past the library, past the game room, into the main hallway. They paused, right above where the door should be. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the footsteps continued. Away from the door, into the great room. Marlene released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Beside her, Dorian shifted slightly, and she heard him fumbling with something. A moment later, his phone screen glowed to life. The brightness turned down to almost nothing, but enough to see by. They were surrounded by fortune. Gold bars stacked 10 high, stretching back into shadows. Paintings that belonged in museums, sculptures that art collectors would kill for. And somewhere in all of this, journals that explained why it was all here, hidden beneath a mountain lodge that time had forgotten. "We need to know what we're dealing with," Dorian whispered, his mouth close to Marlene's ear, "before we go back up there." Marlene nodded, even though every instinct screamed at her to run, to climb those stairs and get as far from this place as possible. But Dorian was right. Knowledge was power. And right now they had neither. They moved quietly to the desk, using Dorian's phone screen as their only light. Marlene picked up the journal she'd started reading, the one with the initials CW on the cover. Dorian found another, this one bound in red leather, and began flipping through it with careful fingers. Marlene read by the dim glow, squinting at the elegant handwriting. April 2nd, 1953. The first items have arrived, the Rembrandt sketches, believed lost in the war. The family that owned them needed cash desperately, and I provided it. They think I'm a collector, a wealthy enthusiast. They don't know I'm a guardian. These pieces will be safe here, preserved until a time when they can be returned to the world without being squandered or sold to the highest bidder. Marlena flipped forward, scanning entries. June 1957. Acquired 3 more paintings today. The seller was desperate, didn't even know what he had. I paid him fairly, more than he asked, and added his pieces to the collection. The vault is becoming what I always dreamed, a sanctuary for beauty. More flipping, more years passing in elegant script. December 1963. The lodge is thriving. Guests come from all over, drawn by the beauty of the mountain, the peace of the location. None of them know what lies beneath their feet. None of them can know. This secret is mine alone. And then, a shift in tone. March 1974. The market has collapsed. Men I've known for decades are losing everything. They come to me, begging for help, asking me to hide their assets, to shelter their wealth from the vultures circling their empires. I have become what I swore I'd never be, not a guardian of beauty, but a banker for the desperate and corrupt. Marlena's stomach tightened. She looked up at Dorian, who was reading his own journal with a grim expression. "What does yours say?" she whispered. "It's a ledger," Dorian replied quietly. "Names, dates, amounts. Cornelius Whitmore, that's who CW is. He was helping people hide assets. Wealthy clients who didn't want their holdings found during audits or divorces or investigations. He'd take their money, their art, their gold and store it here, for a fee. So this is all stolen? Not stolen, hidden. There's a difference. Legally, anyway. Dorian flipped more pages. But Marlena, look at these amounts. This entry from 1976, 2.3 million in bearer bonds. And this one from 1978, gold bars worth 4 million. It just keeps going. Marlena returned to the first journal, reading faster now. August 1979. The vault is nearly full. I've amassed more wealth than any museum, more than most national treasuries. But the men who entrusted me with their fortunes are growing anxious. Some want their items back. Others want them moved. They don't understand. These things are safe here, safer than anywhere else in the world. I won't move them. I won't risk them. November 1981. Threats have been made. Vincent came to see me today, demanded I return his collection. He brought 2 men with him, thugs in expensive suits. I refused. The vault stays sealed. The items stay protected. I've dedicated my life to this. I won't abandon it now. Marlena's hands trembled as she turned pages. July 1982. I know they're planning something. The phone calls have stopped. The letters have stopped. The silence is more terrifying than the threats ever were. I've begun making arrangements. If something happens to me, if they succeed in whatever they're planning, there are instructions, hidden, for someone worthy to find. And then, the final entry in Cornelius Whitmore's hand. September 22nd, 1983. Tomorrow I will meet with them one last time. They've promised to discuss terms, to find a peaceful resolution. I don't believe them, but I am tired of fighting, tired of fear. If you are reading this, then I am gone. Take what you find here. Use it wisely. Do not let greed consume you as it consumed the men who killed me, because make no mistake, if I am dead, it was murder. Cornelius Whitmore. Marlena stared at the final words, her pulse pounding in her ears. Murdered. 41 years ago, almost to the day, and they were standing in his hidden vault, reading his last testimony. "Dorian," she said, her voice shaking. "We need to—" "Marlena, look at this." Dorian held out the red leather journal, his finger marking a page. "This isn't in Cornelius's handwriting. Someone else wrote this, after he died." Marlena took the journal carefully. The handwriting was different, cruder, shakier. September 24th, 1983. It's done. Cornelius is gone. We buried him in the mountains where no one will ever find him. The lodge is closed. We told his daughter he had a heart attack while hiking. Body never recovered. She believes us. Why wouldn't she? We're his oldest friends, his most trusted associates." Marlena felt bile rise in her throat. She kept reading. "But now we have a problem. The vault is sealed. Cornelius changed the locks before he died, hid the new key somewhere in the lodge. We've searched for 3 days and found nothing. And even if we found it, we can't access the items. Half of what's down there is too hot to sell. Stolen pieces, reported missing, with investigators still looking. If we try to move anything, we'll expose ourselves. So we make a decision. We leave it all, seal the lodge. Let time bury our secrets along with Cornelius. In 20 years, 30 years, when everyone who remembers has died, when the investigations have gone cold, then we can return, then it will be safe." The entry ended there. Marlena flipped through the rest of the journal, but the pages were blank. They'd planned to come back, to retrieve their hidden fortunes, but they never had. Why? "Keep reading," Dorian urged, holding out another journal. This one was thin, more of a notebook, and the entries were sporadic. March 1991. Vincent died last night. Heart attack. Now it's just me and Thaddeus. We talk sometimes about going back, but the years have made cowards of us both. What if the key was found? What if someone reported what was down there? What if we open that vault and find federal agents waiting? July 1998. Thaddeus's son is asking questions. He found old papers, old contracts with Cornelius's name on them. We told him it was nothing, old business deals that went nowhere. But he's smart, too smart. He suspects something. December 2004. I am dying. Cancer, 6 months at most. The secret will die with me. Thaddeus is too afraid to act alone. The vault will remain sealed forever. Good. Cornelius was right. Some things are safer hidden. Some fortunes are too dangerous to claim. The final entry was dated January 2005. Just 2 words scratched hastily across the page. "Forgive me." Marlena closed the journal and looked at Dorian. In the faint glow of his phone screen, his face was pale, his expression grim. $290 million, he said quietly. "I did the math. Conservative estimates, based on what I've seen in the ledgers and what's visible here. Possibly more if some of these paintings are what I think they are. $290 million. The number was so large it didn't feel real. Marlena had never earned more than $55,000 in her best year of teaching. Her entire life's earnings, 40 years of work, didn't add up to even $1 million. And they were standing in the middle of nearly $300 million, hidden by a dead man and forgotten by murderers too afraid to claim it. Some of these items, Marlena said slowly, thinking it through, were reported stolen or lost. Yes. Which means there are people out there, families, museums, who have been looking for them for decades. Probably. And we just found them. We did. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the discovery pressing down on them like the mountain itself. Above them, the footsteps had started again. Whoever was up there was moving through the lodge methodically, opening doors, searching, getting closer to the carved oak door with every passing minute. What happens next will turn their quiet retirement upside down, reveal a conspiracy that powerful people want to stay buried, and prove that sometimes the most dangerous discoveries are the ones you were never meant to find. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. "We need to hide," Marlena whispered. "If they find the stairs, if they come down here." "There," Dorian pointed to a gap between 2 tall shelving units, a narrow space just wide enough for a person to squeeze into. "Turn off all lights. Don't make a sound." They moved quickly, quietly, Marlena clutching the journals to her chest while Dorian pocketed his phone. They pressed themselves into the gap, the metal shelves cold against their backs, and waited. Minutes passed like hours. The darkness was complete, disorienting. Marlena focused on her breathing, keeping it slow and silent. Beside her, she could feel Dorian's warmth, could hear his heart beating as rapidly as her own. Then, from the stairs, a sound. Footsteps descending, slow, cautious, but coming down. A beam of light swept across the vault, much brighter than their flashlights had been. A powerful LED spotlight that illuminated everything it touched in harsh white detail. Marlena held her breath. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. The light moved methodically across the vault, cataloguing, assessing. It paused on the desk where they'd been reading. Paused on the extinguished oil lamp, the boxes of matches. A man's voice, low and annoyed. "Someone's been here." Footsteps moving deeper into the vault, the light sweeping closer to their hiding spot. Marlena's muscles screamed from the tension of holding perfectly still. Her heart hammered so hard she was certain it could be heard echoing off the stone walls. The light passed over their hiding spot once, twice. On the third pass it stopped. Marlena closed her eyes, preparing for discovery, for confrontation, for whatever came next. But then the light moved on. The footsteps retreated, back toward the stairs, back up toward the lodge. They stayed hidden for another 20 minutes, neither daring to move. Finally, when the silence had stretched so long that Marlena's legs had gone numb, Dorian shifted slightly. "I think they're gone," he breathed. They emerged from their hiding spot slowly, painfully. Marlena's knees cracked as she straightened, and Dorian had to lean against a shelf for a moment to get his balance back. "We need to go up," Marlena said. "We need to leave, right now." "Agreed." They climbed the stairs as quickly as their aging bodies would allow, Dorian's phone providing just enough light to see the steps. 112 steps up, each one feeling steeper than the descent. At the top, they paused, listening. The lodge was silent. Dorian pushed the door open wider and peered out into the hallway. "Empty," he whispered. They stepped out into the hallway, and that's when Marlena saw it. On the floor, directly in front of the carved oak door, was a piece of paper. She picked it up with trembling fingers. The message was typed stark black letters on white paper. "Leave now! Forget what you saw. This is your only warning." No signature, no explanation, just a threat dressed up as advice. Dorian read over her shoulder, his face grim. "Well, that's clear enough." "We should go," Marlena said. "Pack our things and leave right now." "And go where? Tell who?" "Marlena, we don't have cell service. The nearest town is 45 minutes away on dirt roads we can barely navigate in daylight. It's past midnight now." Marlena looked at her watch. He was right. While they'd been in the vault, hours had passed. It was nearly 1 in the morning. "We wait until first light," Dorian said. "Then we leave, and on the way down the mountain, we figure out who to tell and how to tell them." "What about the journals? The evidence?" Dorian held up the red leather journal. "I kept this one, the one written by Cornelius's murderer. That's evidence. That's proof of what happened here." They moved through the lodge carefully, checking rooms, looking for any sign that the intruder was still there. Everything was exactly as they'd left it, their suitcases in their room, the fire in the great room burned down to embers, the welcome note still on the table by the door. But the presence, or the absence of presence, felt different now. The lodge no longer felt merely abandoned. It felt watched. They didn't sleep. Marlena sat at the window in their room, staring out at the dark forest, while Dorian opened his laptop. He'd downloaded several research files before they'd lost internet, back when they were still on the road, historical databases and news archives he used for his amateur historical research. "I'm searching for Cornelius Whitmore," he said, typing quickly. "Let's see what the official story was." Marlena joined him, peering over his shoulder at the screen. The search returned several results: news articles from local papers, a small obituary, a few mentions in business journals. "Here," Dorian clicked on an article from September 1983. "Listen to this. Cornelius Whitmore, 68, owner of Whitmore Peak Lodge and retired private banker, is presumed dead following a hiking accident on September 23rd. Whitmore, an avid outdoorsman, set out for a solo hike and failed to return. Despite extensive search efforts, no body has been recovered. Authorities believe Whitmore may have fallen into one of the many crevasses that scar the mountain terrain. Services will be held at It Goes On. Presumed dead, Marlena said quietly. Not confirmed, because there was no body. Because they murdered him and hid him somewhere in these mountains. Dorian clicked through more results. Look at this. The lodge was sold to a holding company in 1984. Nominal amount $1. The holding company was called White Mountain Properties LLC. Owners not listed. His murderers, Marlena said. They took ownership to control access, to make sure no one could stumble onto the vault. And they've held it ever since. 40 years of paying taxes, minimal maintenance, keeping it off the market, waiting for the right time to come back. But they never did. No, because they were cowards. Because they knew what they'd done would destroy them if it came to light. Dorian scrolled through more articles. Here's something interesting. 1993. Mysterious death rocks form a business circle. A man named Randolph Vincent, he was one of Cornelius's clients according to the ledgers, died in his sleep. Heart attack, natural causes. Or made to look natural, Marlena said. And here, 2005, Edgar Phillips, another name from the ledgers, died of cancer. Obituary mentions his long career in private wealth management. The one who wrote the journal entries, Marlena breathed. The one who said, "Forgive me." They kept searching, piecing together a story from fragments and obituaries and old news items. Cornelius Whitmore had been a respected banker, trusted by wealthy clients, known for his discretion. When he'd retired to the mountains and opened his lodge, people thought it was a charming eccentricity. No one knew about the vault. No one suspected what was hidden beneath the beautiful timber structure. And when he'd died, presumed lost to the mountain he loved, people mourned briefly and moved on. His daughter, mentioned in several articles, had held a memorial service, had scattered flowers in the mountains, had eventually moved on with her life. She didn't know her father had been murdered. "We need to tell her," Marlena said suddenly. "His daughter. She deserves to know the truth." "We don't even know if she's still alive," Dorian pointed out. "These articles are 40 years old." "Then we find out. Dorian, this isn't just about treasure. This is about justice. A man was murdered, and his killers got away with it because everyone was too afraid or too complicit to speak up." Dorian closed the laptop and looked at his wife. In the dim light of their room, she looked fierce, determined. This was the woman who'd spent 40 years teaching children to read, to question, to stand up for what was right, and she wasn't about to stop now. "Okay," he said. "Okay, we'll find her, we'll tell her, and we'll make sure the truth comes out." "But first," Marlena said, glancing toward the window where the first grey hints of dawn were beginning to show, "we get out of this lodge alive." They packed their suitcases as the sun rose, moving quickly and quietly. Dorian hid the red leather journal in his suitcase, wrapped in a sweater. Marlena took photographs of several pages from Cornelius's journal with her phone camera, making sure the images were clear and readable. By 6 in the morning, they were ready to leave. They carried their bags down the stairs, through the great room, toward the front door. That's when they heard a car approaching. Through the tall windows, they saw headlights cutting through the early morning mist. A vehicle, something large and expensive-looking, was climbing the final stretch of road to the lodge. "Go!" Dorian said urgently. "Out the back, now!" But before they could move, the front door opened. A woman stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dawn light. She was perhaps 55 or 60, with silver hair pulled back in a braid, wearing hiking boots and a fleece jacket. Her face was weathered but kind, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Please," she said, her voice steady but not unkind. "Don't run. I'm not here to hurt you." Marlena and Dorian froze, suitcases in hand. The woman stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "My name is Sable Whitmore. Cornelius Whitmore was my father, and I've been waiting 41 years for someone to find that vault." Marlena's grip on her suitcase loosened. "You knew about the vault?" "I suspected. My father was many things, but careless wasn't one of them. When he died, when they told me it was a hiking accident, something didn't feel right. He knew these mountains better than anyone. He wouldn't have just fallen." Sable moved closer, her eyes moving between Marlena and Dorian. "You found it, didn't you? You found what he was hiding." Dorian set down his suitcase. "How did you know we'd be here?" A ghost of a smile crossed Sable's face. "I own the booking website, set it up 8 years ago. I've been waiting, watching, hoping someone curious enough and brave enough would come along. Someone who would find the vault and not be corrupted by what was inside." "You've been testing people?" Marlena said, incredulous. "I've been searching for the right people. Most who book don't even show up. They see this place and turn around. Some stay for a night and leave. You're the first to find the hidden key, to open the door, to go down into the mountain." Sable's eyes were bright with emotion. "You're the first to read his words." "Someone else was here last night," Dorian said. "Someone who left us a warning." Sable's expression hardened. "Thaddeus's son. He's been watching the lodge for years, ever since his father died. He knows there's something here, but he doesn't know what or where, and he's dangerous because he wants it, whatever it is, without understanding what it cost." She moved to the fireplace, staring at the cold ashes from the fire they'd built the night before. "My father was a good man who made bad choices. He thought he was preserving beauty, protecting wealth, but he got tangled up with men who saw only profit. And when he tried to extricate himself, when he tried to do the right thing, they killed him." "We found the journal," Marlena said quietly. "The one written by his murderer. We know what happened." Sable turned, tears gleaming in her eyes. "Then you know more than I ever did. All these years I've only had suspicions. Accusations I couldn't prove. Suspicions that made me look crazy to everyone who knew my father." She wiped at her eyes impatiently. "That vault, everything in it, some of it belongs to people my father cheated. People who trusted him and lost everything. Some of it is stolen, taken from museums and collectors who are still searching for their pieces. And some of it is legitimately his, acquired legally and stored safely." $290 million, Dorian said. "Give or take." Sable nodded. "That sounds about right. I've been trying to estimate for years." She looked at them both, her expression earnest and desperate. "I don't want the money. I want justice. I want to expose the men who killed my father. I want to return what was stolen, and I want my father's name cleared." "His name?" Marlena asked. "He died branded as an eccentric who made a fatal mistake. History remembers him as foolish. I want history to remember him as he was, flawed, but trying to make things right at the end, and I can't do it alone." She stepped closer to them. "Help me. You found the vault. You have the journals. Together we can expose the truth." Marlena looked at Dorian. He looked back at her, and in that moment they both knew they'd already made their decision. The moment they'd turned that key, the moment they'd descended those stairs, they'd stepped into a story that was bigger than their quiet retirement, bigger than their careful, planned life. "We'll help you," Marlena said, "but we need to do this carefully. Whoever was here last night, whoever left that warning, they're not going to just let us walk away with evidence." Sable nodded. "I know. That's why we need to document everything, photograph it all, create backups, make sure the truth can't be buried again, even if something happens to us." "There's something else you should know," Dorian said, pulling out his laptop. "The lodge has been under surveillance. We need to check something." They moved to the library, where Sable pulled back a section of bookshelves to reveal a small control room Marlena and Dorian hadn't found in their exploration. Inside were monitors, old security equipment, some of it updated more recently. My father installed cameras in the 1970s, Sable explained. Basic security for when he had guests. After he died, the holding company that took over kept them running, and I've been monitoring them remotely for years. She powered up the system, and screens flickered to life showing different views of the lodge. The great room, the hallways, the library, the parking area, and there, one small monitor in the corner, showing the carved oak door, showing the stairs descending into darkness. That camera's been live since you arrived, Sable said quietly. Everything you've done, everywhere you've gone, it's been recorded. Marlena felt her blood run cold. Who has access to these feeds? That's what we need to find out, Sable replied, typing rapidly on a keyboard. Because if someone's been watching you, they know you found the vault, and they know you're not going to just walk away. The screen filled with code, access logs, IP addresses. Sable scanned through them quickly, her expression growing darker. There, she pointed, remote access, granted to 3 different users. One is me, one is an IP address registered to a law firm in Seattle, and one is, oh God. What? Dorian asked. It's accessing from inside the lodge, right now. Sable looked up at them, fear clear on her face. Whoever was here last night never left. They're still here, watching us right now. The monitors showed empty rooms, silent hallways. No movement anywhere in the lodge except for the 3 of them huddled in the control room. But Sable's fingers were still flying across the keyboard, her face pale in the glow of the screens. They're masking their location, she muttered, switching between cameras, making it look like no one's accessing the feed. But the data stream doesn't lie. Someone is watching us right now. Marlena moved closer to Dorian, her heart hammering. The lodge suddenly felt different, smaller, the walls pressing in. Every shadow could hide someone. Every creaking floorboard could be a footstep. How long have they been watching? Dorian asked, his voice tight. Sable scrolled through logs. Since yesterday morning. They started accessing the feed at 7:43 a.m., about 2 hours before you arrived. So they knew we were coming, Marlena said. They were waiting. Yes. Sable closed the laptop sharply. Which means we need to get you out of here, now, before whoever's watching decides surveillance isn't enough. But the evidence, Dorian protested. The journals, the vault, we can't just leave it all. You're not leaving it. You're preserving it by surviving. Sable stood, grabbing a backpack from beneath the desk. I've been preparing for this moment for 8 years. I have backup plans, safe houses, contacts. But first, we need to move. She led them quickly through the lodge, not toward the front door where they'd entered, but deeper into the building, past the kitchen, through a narrow pantry, to what looked like a solid wall. Sable pressed her palm against a specific section of wood paneling. Something clicked. The wall swung inward, revealing a narrow passage. Service corridor, she explained. My father built several of them into the lodge, for staff to move through without disturbing guests. This one leads to a garage on the north side of the property. They moved single file through the darkness, Sable leading with a small flashlight. The passage smelled of old wood and dust. Marlena's shoulders brushed both walls. Behind her, she could hear Dorian's breathing, quick and shallow. The corridor twisted, descended, then climbed again. They passed several branching paths that Sable ignored. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 5 minutes, they emerged into a large garage. 2 vehicles sat inside, Sable's modern SUV and, covered by a tarp in the corner, something larger. My father's Land Rover, Sable said, pulling the tarp free. 1978. I've kept it maintained. It still runs. Why do we need 2 vehicles? Marlena asked. Because we're going to split up. You 2 take my SUV, head straight to Seattle. Here's an address. She pressed a card into Marlena's hand. It's a lawyer I trust. Give him the journal Dorian took. Tell him everything. He'll know what to do." "What about you?" Dorian asked. "I'm going back into the lodge. I'm going to download every second of security footage, every access log, every piece of digital evidence, and then I'm going to trigger the alarm system." "Alarm system?" Sable smiled grimly. "My father was paranoid. He installed a silent alarm connected directly to the county sheriff's office. I've kept the system active all these years, paying the monthly fees, waiting for the right moment. When I trigger it, deputies will be here within 30 minutes. But if someone's in the lodge watching, they'll run, which gives you time to get down the mountain and to safety." Sable opened the driver's door of her SUV, retrieved the keys, and tossed them to Marlena. "Go, please. My father died trying to do the right thing. I won't let you die for the same reason." Marlena caught the keys, feeling their weight in her palm. She looked at Dorian, saw her own hesitation reflected in his eyes. They'd stumbled into this by accident, but walking away now felt like abandonment. "We'll go," Dorian said finally. "But we're not running. We're regrouping. We'll get the journal to your lawyer, and then we're coming back to help you finish this." Sable's eyes glistened. "Thank you. Now go, quickly." They loaded their suitcases into the SUV, Dorian tucking the red leather journal deep inside his bag. Marlena slid into the driver's seat, adjusting the mirrors with shaking hands. It had been years since she'd driven anything this large. Sable opened the garage door with a remote. Morning sunlight flooded in, painfully bright after the darkness of the passage. The gravel road stretched out before them, winding down through the trees. "Wait!" Sable called out. She ran to the SUV, pulled something from her pocket, and pressed it into Marlena's hand. A USB drive. Backup of everything. The journals photographed, the ledgers, the security footage I've already collected. If something happens to me, this is the only copy. Marlena closed her fingers around it. "Nothing's going to happen to you." "Probably not. But my father probably thought the same thing." Sable stepped back. "Drive safe. Don't stop until you reach the city. And Marlena, thank you for caring enough to look." Marlena felt tears prick her eyes. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and put the SUV in gear. They rolled out of the garage into the crisp mountain morning. In the rearview mirror, Marlena watched Sable close the garage door and disappear back into the passage. Then she focused on the road ahead, navigating the switchbacks with white-knuckled concentration. They drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. The lodge disappeared behind them, swallowed by trees and distance. The road was rough, barely maintained, and Marlena had to slow to a crawl in several places where rocks had tumbled across the path. "We're really doing this," Dorian said finally. "We're really in the middle of a 40-year-old conspiracy." "Seems that way," Marlena replied, steering around a particularly nasty pothole. 2 days ago, we were planning a quiet week in the mountains, reading books, maybe some light hiking. Life's funny that way." Dorian let out a short laugh. "Funny. That's one word for it." They rounded a bend, and Marlena saw something that made her foot hit the brake hard. A black SUV blocked the road ahead, parked sideways across the narrow track. No one was visible inside it, but the engine was running, exhaust curling into the cold air. "Marlena," Dorian said quietly. "Back up. Now." She shifted into reverse, but before she could press the accelerator, another vehicle appeared behind them. Identical black SUV boxing them in. They were trapped. The front doors of the vehicle ahead opened. 2 men stepped out, both wearing dark suits completely inappropriate for the mountain terrain. Both had the kind of build that suggested either serious gym time or serious violence. Probably both. Marlena's hands gripped the steering wheel. Her mind raced through options. Ram the vehicle ahead? The SUV was sturdy, but she had no idea if it could push through. Try to go off-road? The forest was too thick, too steep. One of the men approached, moving with unhurried confidence. He stopped a few feet from the driver's window and gestured for Marlena to roll it down. She didn't. He waited a moment, then pulled something from his jacket. Not a gun, Marlena realized with a flood of relief. A wallet. He flipped it open, showing a badge. Private security, he gestured again, more insistently. Dorian leaned over. We might need to talk to them. Or we could sit here and wait for help. What help? We're miles from anywhere. Sable's back at the lodge, and these guys, they're not going to just give up and leave. Marlena knew he was right. With trembling fingers, she rolled down the window halfway. Mr. and Mrs. Rivers, the man said, his voice professionally neutral. I need you to step out of the vehicle, please. On whose authority? Marlena asked, impressed that her voice didn't shake. Thaddeus Crane. He owns this property. You're trespassing. We have a reservation. We paid for a week. A flicker of something, amusement maybe, crossed the man's face. That reservation was fraudulent. The property is not available for rental. Never has been. Then why is there a booking website? That's between Mr. Crane and the person operating the illegal listing. He gestured to the vehicle behind them. Please step out. Mr. Crane would like to speak with you. From the back SUV, a door opened. A man emerged, and even from a distance, Marlena could see the resemblance to the old photographs in the lodge. Same sharp features, same calculating eyes. But where the men in those photos had smiled, this man's face was carved from ice. Thaddeus Crane was perhaps 55, with silver-touched hair styled expensively, and a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marlena's car back home. He approached with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never been told no in his life. Mrs. Rivers, Mr. Rivers. He stopped beside the security guard. I apologize for the dramatic roadblock, but when I learned uninvited guests were exploring my family's property, I felt we should have a conversation. Your family's property, Dorian said. I thought the lodge belonged to Whitmore Peak Holdings. Crane's smile didn't reach his eyes. And who do you think controls that holding company? My father was Cornelius Whitmore's business partner. When Cornelius died, the property passed to their joint venture, and when my father died, it passed to me. Funny, Marlena said, because the property records show the lodge was sold to the holding company for $1 in 1984. That's not an inheritance, that's a transfer, and I'm guessing it wasn't exactly legal. Crane's expression hardened. I don't know what you think you've found, but I assure you everything regarding this property is perfectly legal. Documented. Above board. Is murder above board? The words were out before Marlena could stop them. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Even the security guards shifted uncomfortably. Crane's face went very still. That's a serious accusation, and a foolish one to make without evidence. Dorian pulled the red leather journal from his jacket and held it up so Crane could see it through the window. We have evidence. We have the confession of the man who helped kill Cornelius Whitmore, your father. For the first time, Crane's composure cracked, his eyes fixed on the journal with an intensity that made Marlena's skin crawl. Where did you get that? Where do you think? Marlena said. We found it in the vault, the one you've been searching for 40 years, the one filled with enough evidence to put you and your family's legacy in prison for the rest of your life. Crane's hand shot out, gripping the window frame. That vault is my property. Everything in it is my property. You're thieves. We're witnesses, Dorian corrected. And by the end of today, so will the authorities be. Crane straightened, composing himself with visible effort. When he spoke again, his voice was smooth, reasonable. Let's not be hasty. I understand you've stumbled into a complicated situation, but it doesn't have to become your problem. He pulled out a checkbook from his inner pocket, produced a pen. I'm prepared to offer you substantial compensation for your discretion. Shall we say $100,000 each, $200,000 total, for a journal that means nothing to you and everything to my family's privacy? Marlena stared at him. $200,000. That was nearly 4 times her annual salary when she'd been teaching. That was a new house, a secure retirement, travel, everything she and Dorian had been carefully saving toward. "You think we can be bought?" she said quietly. "Everyone can be bought, Mrs. Rivers. It's just a matter of finding the right price." Crane clicked his pen. 250,000, final offer. "How about this for a counter-offer?" Dorian said, his voice hard in a way Marlena had rarely heard. "You get out of our way. We drive to Seattle. We turn over every piece of evidence we've found to the authorities. And maybe, if you cooperate fully, you'll only spend 20 years in prison instead of the rest of your life." Crane's mask of civility shattered, his face twisted with rage. "You sanctimonious fool! Do you have any idea who you're threatening? I have lawyers who will bury you. I have connections in every courthouse in this state. I've spent 40 years building an empire on the foundation my father laid, and I will not let some retired schoolteacher tear it down because of misplaced moral superiority." "Your father was a murderer," Marlena said, "and you've spent your whole life profiting from his crime." "My father was protecting what was his. Cornelius Whitmore was a thief who convinced wealthy men to trust him with their fortunes, then tried to keep it all for himself. My father and his partners simply took back what was theirs, by killing him, by making a difficult decision in a difficult situation." Crane stepped back, gesturing to his security team. "Last chance. Give me the journal, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and walk away wealthy. Or refuse and discover just how difficult your lives can become." Marlena looked at Dorian. His jaw was set, his eyes fierce. She knew what he was going to say before he said it. "Go to hell," Dorian told Crane. For a moment, no one moved. Then Crane nodded once sharply. "So be it." He turned to the security guards. "Detain them, take the journal, search their vehicle. I want every piece of evidence they removed from the lodge." The guards moved forward. Marlena's hand flew to the gear shift. She threw the SUV into reverse and slammed her foot on the accelerator. The vehicle lurched backward, tires spitting gravel. The guard nearest her door had to jump aside to avoid being hit. Behind them, the second black SUV was still blocking the road, but the driver wasn't in position. He was standing outside, and Marlena aimed straight for the gap between the open door and the vehicle's front bumper. "Marlena, you can't," Dorian started. She could, and she did. Metal screamed as they scraped past the black SUV, her side mirror exploding in a shower of plastic and glass. The impact jolted them hard, but they were through, racing backward down the mountain road. Marlena couldn't see where she was going, couldn't risk the time to turn around. She just kept her foot on the gas, steering wildly, using the rearview mirror and pure instinct. A gunshot cracked through the morning air. "They're shooting at us!" Dorian yelled, ducking low. Another shot. This one hit something metal, a spark visible in the mirror. Marlena yanked the wheel hard, swinging the SUV around in a tight arc that nearly sent them sliding off the road. For a heart-stopping moment, the right wheels lifted off the ground, the whole vehicle tilting dangerously. Then they crashed back down, facing forward now, and Marlena shifted gears and flew down the mountain. Behind them, both black SUVs were giving chase, engines roaring. The road was a nightmare of curves and switchbacks. Marlena took them too fast, tires sliding on loose gravel, the vehicle fishtailing wildly. Beside her, Dorian braced himself against the dashboard, his face pale. "There's a turn-off ahead," he said, studying the hand-drawn map they'd used to find the lodge. "About 2 miles, leads to an old logging area. We might be able to lose them." "Might isn't good enough. It's all we've got." Marlena pushed the SUV harder. The engine whined in protest. In the mirror, the black SUVs were gaining, their drivers more experienced with the terrain, more reckless in their pursuit. Another shot. This one hit the rear window, spiderwebbing the glass but not breaking through. "Bulletproof," Dorian said, surprised. "Sable," Marlena breathed. She knew this might happen. The turnoff appeared suddenly, almost hidden by overgrowth. Marlena wrenched the wheel and they careened onto an even rougher track, branches slapping against the windows, underbrush scraping the undercarriage. The black SUVs followed. They burst into a clearing, an old logging area just as Dorian had said. Stumps dotted the landscape like broken teeth. Rusted equipment molded in the weeds. And straight ahead, a barrier. A locked gate with a chain and a sign. Private property. No trespassing. Marlena didn't slow down. She aimed for the gate and prayed. They hit it at 40 miles per hour. The chain snapped. The gate flew open, and they were through, racing into forest so thick the morning sun barely penetrated. Behind them, the black SUVs hesitated at the broken gate. Marlena used those precious seconds to put distance between them, navigating by instinct through a forest that hadn't seen vehicles in decades. "Where does this go?" she asked breathlessly. Dorian traced the map with his finger. "If I'm reading this right, and I'm not sure I am, it should eventually connect with the state highway, about 15 miles. 15 miles through unmapped forest with armed men chasing them." Marlena's hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. Her heart felt like it might explode from her chest, but she kept driving. They'd been on the run for maybe 10 minutes when Marlena saw something ahead, a building partially collapsed, surrounded by rusted machinery. "Old lumber mill," Dorian said. "Probably shut down in the 80s. Can we hide there?" "They'll search it. Not if we give them something else to chase." Marlena pulled up beside the mill and stopped. She jumped out, ran to the back of the SUV, and started throwing their suitcases into the underbrush. "What are you doing?" Dorian asked. "Making a trail, making it look like we ran." She grabbed his suitcase, the one with the journal hidden inside. "Bring this. We're going to hide the evidence somewhere they'll never find it." They ran into the mill, Dorian struggling to keep up, despite his recent health scare. Inside, the building was a maze of rotted catwalks and broken machinery. Sunlight streamed through holes in the roof, illuminating clouds of dust. Marlena pulled Dorian toward a massive piece of equipment, some kind of industrial saw. Beneath it, a metal maintenance hatch was set into the floor. "Help me," she grunted, pulling at the hatch. Together they wrenched it open. Below was darkness and the smell of old grease. "Hide the journal down there," Marlena said. "Wrap it in something waterproof first." Dorian pulled off his jacket, wrapped the journal carefully, and lowered it into the hatch. He found a ledge about 6 feet down and secured the bundle there. They closed the hatch, just as the sound of engines filled the clearing outside. "Run!" Marlena whispered. They ran deeper into the mill toward a back exit they'd seen. Behind them, car doors slammed. Voices shouted orders. They emerged from the back of the mill into dense forest. Marlena had no idea where they were going now, no map, no plan. They just ran, stumbling over roots, ducking under branches, putting distance between themselves and the men hunting them. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, they stopped, both gasping for breath. Marlena's chest burned. Dorian looked grey, leaning heavily against a tree. "We can't keep running," he wheezed. "I can't." Marlena pulled out her phone. Still no signal. She looked around at the endless trees, the sky barely visible through the canopy. They were lost, hunted, separated from their only evidence. And then, cutting through the forest sounds, she heard it. The distant wail of sirens. Sable had triggered the alarm. Help was coming. They just had to survive long enough for it to arrive. "This way," Marlena said, choosing a direction at random. "Stay close to me." They walked as quickly as Dorian could manage, always listening for pursuit. The sirens grew louder, then seemed to fade, then louder again. Sound traveled strangely in the mountains. They found a stream and followed it, reasoning that water would eventually lead to civilization. Their shoes filled with icy water. Marlena's carefully packed clothes were soaked and torn, but they kept moving. And then, breaking through the trees ahead, she saw it. A road. Not a logging track or a dirt path, but actual asphalt, a state highway. They stumbled onto it just as 3 county sheriff's vehicles screamed past, heading up toward the lodge. Marlena stepped into the road, waving her arms frantically. The last vehicle, trailing behind the others, slammed on its brakes. A young deputy jumped out, hand on his weapon. "Ma'am, you need to get out of the road." "Please," Marlena gasped. "We need help. There are men. They were shooting at us. They're still up there." The deputy's expression shifted from annoyed to alert. "Shooting? Are you injured?" "No, but we have evidence. Evidence of murder. We need to speak to whoever's in charge." The deputy spoke rapidly into his radio. Within minutes, another vehicle appeared, this one unmarked. A woman in a blazer stepped out, showing a detective's badge. "I'm Detective Carla Reeves," she said. "Start from the beginning." Marlena and Dorian sat in the back of the detective's car, wrapped in emergency blankets someone had produced, and told their story. They told her about the lodge, the vault, the journals, Cornelius Whitmore's murder. They told her about Sable, about Thaddeus Crane, about being chased through the forest. Detective Reeves listened without interrupting, taking notes. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "This is one hell of a story," she said finally. "It's all true," Dorian insisted. "Every word." "I believe you. Mainly because we just received a call from a woman named Sable Whitmore claiming her father was murdered 41 years ago, and she has proof. She's at the lodge now, refusing to leave until we take her statement." "She's safe?" Marlena asked. "She's safe, and she's making quite an impression on my colleagues." Reeves closed her notebook. "Now, you mentioned evidence. A journal?" "Hidden," Marlena said. "In the old lumber mill. We can show you where." "And there's more at the lodge. Much more." Reeves nodded. "Okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm taking you both to the station. You're going to give formal statements, and then we're going to bring in some people who are way above my pay grade, because if even half of what you're telling me is true, this is the biggest case this county has seen in decades." As they drove away from the mountain, Marlena looked back through the rear window. Somewhere up there was a lodge full of secrets, a vault full of stolen fortunes, and a 41-year-old truth that was finally coming to light. She reached over and took Dorian's hand. It was scratched and dirty, but steady. "We did it," he said quietly. "We're not done yet," Marlena replied. But for the first time since they'd opened that carved oak door, she felt something other than fear. She felt hope. 3 hours later, they sat in a conference room at the county sheriff's office, surrounded by people in suits. FBI agents, state investigators, the county prosecutor, even someone from the state attorney general's office. On the table between them lay the red leather journal, retrieved from the lumber mill by a forensics team. Beside it, printouts of the photographs Marlena had taken with her phone. And on a laptop screen, security footage from the lodge showing Thaddeus Crane's men conducting their own search of the property over the years. Sable sat across from them, her eyes red from crying but her voice strong as she corroborated everything, adding details from her own decades of investigation. The lead FBI agent, a man named Thomas Garrett, leaned back in his chair. "This is extraordinary. If authenticated, and preliminary analysis suggests it will be, this journal is a confession to conspiracy, fraud, and murder. Combined with the financial records in the vault and Mrs. Whitmore's testimony, we have enough to begin a major investigation." "What about Thaddeus Crane?" Dorian asked. "He had us chased, shot at." "Already in custody," Garrett said with satisfaction. "Picked up trying to leave the state. His security team is being questioned. Turns out shooting at civilians is frowned upon, even for wealthy businessmen." "And the vault?" Marlena asked. "Secured. We have forensic accountants going through every item, every document. Some of what's down there is stolen property that's been missing for decades. We've already identified 3 paintings on the FBI's art crime database. There's going to be a lot of work to sort out ownership, returns, restitution." He looked at them seriously. You two should know, this is going to be a long process. Months, maybe years. You'll need to testify. You'll probably end up in the news. Your quiet retirement is officially over. Marlena and Dorian looked at each other. She saw the same thought in his eyes that was in her mind. They'd come to the mountains for peace. Instead, they'd found purpose. We can handle it, Marlena said. Good, because there's one more thing. Garrett slid a folder across the table. Preliminary assessment puts the total value of the vault's contents at approximately $293 million. Federal law allows for finder's fees in cases involving recovered stolen property. Assuming you don't have any criminal involvement, and I'm confident you don't, you'd be entitled to a percentage. We don't want money, Dorian said immediately. Speak for yourselves, Sable said with a tired laugh. But actually, I agree. I want justice, not profit. Garrett nodded. That's admirable, but you should know the fees exist for a reason. To incentivize people to come forward, to reward those who do the right thing even when it's difficult. How much? Marlena asked, curious despite herself. Standard finder's fee is 10 to 25%. In a case like this, given the extraordinary circumstances and your role in exposing the crime, probably closer to 25. Split 3 ways, we're talking $24 million each, give or take. The number hung in the air like something physical. Marlena had never imagined that much money. Couldn't even properly conceive of it. Think about it, Garrett said. You don't have to decide now. Focus on getting through your statements. Get some rest. We'll talk again soon. As they left the conference room hours later, the sun was setting. Marlena and Dorian stood in the parking lot, exhausted, overwhelmed, and somehow still alive. $24 million, Dorian said wonderingly. We're not taking it, Marlena said. I know. We'll donate it to victims of fraud, to art restitution programs, to, I don't know, something good. I know. Although maybe we keep a little, enough for a nice vacation, somewhere quiet, maybe a beach. Dorian laughed. Definitely a beach, somewhere with absolutely no basements or hidden rooms or 40-year-old conspiracies. Marlena smiled. Then, surprising herself, she laughed too. Really laughed, the kind of deep, relieved laughter that comes after surviving something terrible. Sable emerged from the building, looking as exhausted as they felt. They're putting me up in a hotel. Protective custody until Crane's people are all accounted for. You two should do the same. We will, Marlena promised. Sable pulled them both into a hug. Thank you for everything, for being curious enough to look, brave enough to act, for caring about a man you never met. Thank you for trusting us, Marlena said. They stood together in the fading light, 3 people who'd started the day as strangers and ended it as something more. Allies, friends, witnesses to history. What happens now? Dorian asked. Sable smiled. Now the real work begins. Now we make sure the truth doesn't get buried again. Now we fight. Marlena looked up at the darkening sky, stars beginning to emerge. 2 days ago, she'd been a retired teacher looking for a quiet week in the mountains. Now she was a key witness in a murder case, a co-discoverer of a fortune, and someone who'd stood up to a powerful man and refused to be intimidated. She felt more alive than she had in decades. Then let's fight, she said. And somewhere in the mountains behind them, a lodge full of secrets waited to tell its story. A vault full of stolen beauty prepared to return to the world. And a 41-year-old lie began at last to crumble into truth. 6 months had passed since Marlena and Dorian Rivers stumbled into a mountain lodge and found more than they'd bargained for. 6 months of depositions, interviews, grand jury testimonies, and sleepless nights replaying the moment Thaddeus Crane's men had chased them through the forest. 6 months of learning that doing the right thing came with a cost, but also with rewards they never could have imagined. The winter snow had melted into spring when Marlena found herself sitting in a federal courthouse, her hand raised, swearing to tell the truth. The courtroom was packed with reporters, federal agents, lawyers in expensive suits, and families who'd traveled from across the country to witness justice finally catching up with decades-old crimes. Thaddeus Crane sat at the defense table, his face a mask of barely contained fury. The arrogant businessman who'd tried to buy their silence now looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of evidence stacked against him. Marlena's testimony took 3 hours. She told them everything. Finding the key, descending the stairs, the vault filled with stolen treasure, the journals detailing murder and conspiracy. She spoke clearly, never wavering, even when Crane's lawyer tried to suggest she and Dorian had trespassed, had stolen evidence, had fabricated their story for profit. "We didn't go looking for any of this," Marlena said firmly. "We went looking for a quiet vacation. What we found was the truth, and the truth doesn't become less true just because it's inconvenient for powerful people." The gallery erupted in applause. The judge had to call for order. When Marlena stepped down, she caught Sable's eye in the audience. Sable was crying but smiling through her tears. 41 years she'd waited for this moment. 41 years of being called paranoid, of having her suspicions dismissed, of carrying the burden of her father's death alone. Not anymore. Dorian testified next, walking through the documents they'd found, explaining the ledgers and the confession written by Crane's father. He'd brought his reading glasses and read directly from photographs of the journals, his voice steady and professional, every bit the history teacher he'd been for 40 years. "These aren't just financial records," Dorian said. "They're a blueprint of systematic fraud. They show how Cornelius Whitmore's clients, many of them engaged in illegal activity themselves, used his vault to hide assets from law enforcement, from their families, from their business partners. And when Whitmore developed a conscience and tried to make things right, they killed him to protect their secrets." The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Elena Vasquez, held up a photograph. "And this is the journal written by Eugene Crane, the defendant's father, confessing to his role in Cornelius Whitmore's murder." "Yes. He didn't explicitly say he killed Cornelius, but he detailed the conspiracy, the cover-up, the decision to seal the lodge and leave everything hidden. It's a confession in everything but name." By the time the trial concluded 3 weeks later, the outcome was never really in doubt. Thaddeus Crane was found guilty on multiple counts: conspiracy to commit fraud, accessory after the fact to murder, obstruction of justice, and half a dozen other charges that would keep him in federal prison for the rest of his life. His security team, the men who'd chased Marlena and Dorian through the forest, pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testimony against Crane. They'd only been following orders, their lawyers argued. The judge wasn't particularly sympathetic, but the trial was only the beginning. The real work, as Sable had promised, came in the aftermath. The vault beneath Whitmore Peak Lodge had contained $293 million in assets, and every single item had to be catalogued, authenticated, and traced back to its rightful owner. Some of it was easy. 3 paintings that had been reported stolen from a private collection in 1976 were returned to the collector's widow, who wept when she saw them. Her late husband had been accused of selling them illegally, of being involved with criminal organizations. The painting's recovery proved his innocence posthumously. Bearer bonds worth $18 million were traced back to a businessman who'd hidden them during a divorce in 1981. He was long dead, but his children, who'd grown up in poverty while their father's wealth sat in a mountain vault, received restitution along with a formal apology. Gold bars, sculptures, rare coins, jewelry, all of it slowly found its way back to families, museums, and institutions that had lost them decades ago. Marlena and Dorian attended many of these returns. They'd become something of celebrities, the treasure teachers as the media had dubbed them, though Marlena hated the nickname. They weren't treasure hunters. They were just 2 people who'd refused to look away when confronted with injustice. One meeting stood out above all others. A woman named Patricia Reeves, 78 years old, traveled from Spokane to meet them. Her father had been one of Cornelius Whitmore's early clients, back before the operation became criminal. He'd stored a collection of rare books in the vault for safekeeping while he underwent bankruptcy proceedings in 1968. "My father died in 1973, Patricia told them, her voice shaking. "He died believing Cornelius had stolen from him. The books were worth enough to save our family farm, to pay off his debts. Without them, we lost everything. My mother never recovered. She died convinced my father had been a fool to trust Cornelius Whitmore." Marlena held the woman's hand as federal agents presented her with 17 rare first editions, perfectly preserved, worth over $4 million at current market value. "Your father wasn't a fool," Marlena said gently. "He was betrayed. But now, finally, you have proof. You can clear his name." Patricia sobbed. "I wish he could have known. I wish my mother could have known." "They know," Dorian said quietly. "Wherever they are, they know." These moments, sitting with families who'd been devastated by the crimes of Cornelius's clients, by the cover-up that followed his murder, these moments reminded Marlena why they'd fought so hard, why they'd refused Crane's bribe, why they'd risked their lives. It wasn't about the money, it was about dignity, about truth, about making sure that the vulnerable and victimized weren't forgotten in the pursuit of profit. The media attention was overwhelming at first. News crews camped outside their modest home in Oregon. Interview requests poured in. Documentary filmmakers wanted their story. Hollywood producers called with movie deals. Marlena turned down most of it. She agreed to one long-form interview with a respected journalist where she and Dorian carefully explained what had happened and why it mattered. She spoke at a few universities, at Dorian's request, talking to criminal justice students about the importance of ordinary citizens standing up to corruption. But mostly, they tried to return to normal life. Or as normal as life could be when you'd uncovered a $300 million conspiracy. The finder's fee became a point of lengthy negotiation. Federal law entitled them to a percentage, but the exact amount was complicated by the fact that so much of the vault's contents were stolen property being returned to rightful owners. Eventually, a figure was settled on. $22 million, split 3 ways between Marlena, Dorian, and Sable. $7.3 million each, minus taxes and legal fees. They met in a lawyer's office to discuss what to do with it. "I don't need $7 million, Marlena said. "I don't know what I'd do with $7 million. "We could travel," Dorian suggested. "See all those places we always talked about, Paris, Tokyo, New Zealand." "We could," Marlena agreed. "But what about everyone else? What about all the families who lost everything and won't get anything back because their cases are too old or the evidence was destroyed?" Sable nodded slowly. "I've been thinking the same thing. My father would hate knowing he'd been part of a system that destroyed people's lives. Even if he tried to make it right at the end, even if he died trying, the damage was still done." "So we make it right now," Dorian said. "We set up a foundation, use the money to help victims of financial fraud, provide legal assistance, financial counseling, support for families trying to recover stolen assets." "The Whitmore Rivers Foundation," Sable said, "dedicated to financial justice and asset recovery." They filed the paperwork 3 weeks later. $7.3 million from each of them, minus what they kept for themselves, a modest sum, just enough to pay off their mortgage, replace their aging car, and yes, take that trip to Paris they'd always dreamed of. $19 million went into the foundation. With careful management, with grants and donations they hoped to attract, it would help victims of fraud for decades to come. The lodge itself became something neither museum nor memorial, but both. The federal government, after extensive legal proceedings, granted ownership to a newly formed non-profit organization. The Whitmore Peak Preservation Society, with Sable as president and Marlena and Dorian on the board of directors. The vault was preserved exactly as they'd found it, minus the items that had been returned to their rightful owners. Visitors could tour it, see the empty shelves that once held fortunes, read the journals that detailed both crime and conscience, learn about the complicated legacy of Cornelius Whitmore. Was he a criminal who'd enabled fraud? Yes. Was he a guardian who'd tried to protect beauty? Also yes. Was he a man who'd died trying to make amends? That too. People are complicated, Sable told a group of schoolchildren during one of the lodge's first official tours. My father made terrible choices, but he also tried to do better, and maybe that's the lesson here. It's never too late to try to do better. The small town nearest the lodge, a dying logging community called Ridgemont, found new life as tourists began arriving. The Whitmore Peak Lodge, once forgotten, became a destination. People came for the mystery, stayed for the history, and left with a deeper understanding of how justice delayed isn't always justice denied. Local businesses thrived. A struggling diner became a gathering spot for visitors. An old motel was renovated, jobs returned. Families who'd been preparing to leave found reasons to stay. "You saved our town," the mayor of Ridgemont told Marlena during a ceremony where they presented her and Dorian with keys to the city. "You gave us hope." "We just found a key and turned it," Marlena said. "Sable Whitmore spent 41 years trying to save this town's history. She's your hero, not us." But the town insisted on honoring all three of them. A small park was dedicated in their names with a plaque that read, "To those who refuse to look away, Marlena and Dorian Rivers and Sable Whitmore. May their courage inspire generations to come." Marlena stood before that plaque on a crisp autumn morning, exactly 1 year after they'd first driven up to the lodge, and felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or completion. Dorian found her there, 2 cups of coffee in his hands, steam rising in the cold air. "You know," he said, handing her a cup, "a year ago we were planning a quiet vacation, reading books, light hiking, maybe some bird watching." Marlena laughed. "We're terrible at quiet vacations." "The worst." He sipped his coffee, "but I wouldn't change it, any of it. Even the part where we were shot at. Okay, maybe not that part, but the rest of it, discovering the vault, standing up to Crane, helping those families, yes, I wouldn't change it." Marlena leaned against him. "Me neither." They'd had a scare 2 months earlier. Dorian's heart had acted up again. Nothing serious, but enough to remind them both that their time wasn't infinite, that every day was a gift, that they'd been given something precious, not just money or recognition, but purpose. "I'm proud of us," Marlena said quietly, "of who we became through all this." "We were always these people," Dorian replied. "We just didn't know it yet." The lodge hosted its official grand opening as the Whitmore Peak Heritage Center on a Saturday in late October. Hundreds of people attended, families whose stolen property had been returned, students from local schools, historians and art experts, federal agents who'd worked the case, reporters documenting the conclusion of one of the longest-running investigations in state history. And standing at the center of it all, Marlena Rivers, 73 years old, wearing a simple blue dress and sensible shoes, her hair silver in the autumn sunlight, her hands still bearing the faint scars from their desperate flight through the forest. She stood at a podium before the lodge's grand entrance, looking out at the gathered crowd, and spoke. "My husband and I came here looking for peace," she began. "What we found instead was a call to action, a reminder that history isn't something that happens to other people in other times. It's happening now, being made by our choices, our courage, or our cowardice." She looked at Sable, standing off to the side, wiping tears from her eyes. Cornelius Whitmore made choices he regretted, but he also made a choice at the end of his life to try to make things right. And that choice, documented in journals hidden in a vault, reached across 4 decades to give us the information we needed to bring justice. Marlena gripped the podium, her voice strengthening. We live in a world that often rewards silence. That tells us to mind our own business, to not make waves, to take the money and look away. But we also live in a world that desperately needs people willing to speak up, to stand firm, to say no when offered bribes and yes when asked if they'll testify to the truth. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Dorian and I aren't heroes. We're not special. We're just two retired teachers who turned a key and refused to close the door on what we found. But maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us need to be. People who, when confronted with injustice, choose to act. She stepped back from the podium to thunderous applause. Sable joined her, and together they cut the ribbon, officially opening the Heritage Center. Cameras flashed, people cheered. And somewhere, Marlena liked to imagine, Cornelius Whitmore finally rested easy. The celebration lasted into the evening. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Marlena and Dorian slipped away from the crowd. They walked around the lodge to the spot where they'd first parked, where they'd first seen the welcome note, where this entire adventure had begun. "What do you think happens next?" Dorian asked. Marlena smiled. "What do you mean?" "Well, we've solved the mystery, exposed the criminals, helped the victims, opened the Heritage Center. What's our next adventure?" "Adventure?" Marlena laughed. "I think we've had enough adventure for one lifetime." "Have we, though?" Dorian pulled out his phone, showing her a news article. "Because I was reading about this old theater in Montana. Been closed since the 1950s. Owner died mysteriously. Property never sold. And look, they're having an estate auction next month. Starting bid? $100. Marlena stared at him. "Absolutely not. Come on. What are the odds we'd find another hidden treasure?" "With our luck." "Pretty good, actually." They looked at each other and burst out laughing, the kind of deep, joyful laughter that comes from surviving impossible things together. "Okay, maybe not Montana," Dorian conceded, "but somewhere, some new place to explore. How about we start with that beach vacation we promised ourselves? Somewhere with no basements, no hidden vaults, and absolutely no mysteries." "Boring," Dorian said, but he was smiling. Boring sounds perfect. They stood together as the stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had watched over this lodge for decades, through its glory days and its abandonment, through murder and cover-up, and finally, justice. Behind them, through the lodge's windows, they could see the celebration continuing, people laughing, sharing stories, examining the exhibits that detailed the vault's contents and the investigation that had followed. "We changed things," Marlena said softly. "We really changed things." "We did," Dorian agreed. "One turned key at a time. Anyone can change the world if they're brave enough to look beyond the surface and strong enough to stand up for what's right." As the evening settled over Whitmore Peak Lodge, Marlena and Dorian Rivers walked hand in hand back toward the celebration, knowing their retirement hadn't turned out anything like they'd planned. It had turned out better, because they'd learned something that no carefully mapped vacation could have taught them. That adventure isn't about the places you go or the things you find. It's about the courage to face the unexpected, the strength to do what's right even when it's difficult, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't the ones you keep. They're the ones you give back. And for Marlena and Dorian, the discovery of $293 million beneath a mountain lodge wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning of a legacy that would help victims of fraud for generations to come, that would preserve history for those who came after, and that would remind everyone who heard it that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Because for these two retired teachers who'd stumbled into the biggest mystery of their lives, the vault beneath the lodge had held more than gold and art and stolen fortunes. It had held a second chance. Not just for Sable Whitmore to clear her father's name, not just for the families who'd lost everything to greed and corruption, but for Marlena and Dorian themselves. A chance to discover that they were braver than they knew, stronger than they'd imagined, and capable of standing firm when powerful people tried to push them aside. The sun had fully set now, and the mountain air carried the sound of music from inside the lodge. Someone had found an old record player and vintage records from Cornelius's era. Big band music drifted through the open windows, a sound from another time, but somehow perfect for this moment. "Dance with me," Dorian said, offering his hand. "Here. Now? Why not? We survived being chased through the forest. I think we've earned a dance." Marlena took his hand, and they swayed together beneath the stars, two people who'd found each other 50 years earlier and had been finding new reasons to fall in love ever since. "Thank you," Dorian said. "For what?" "For being crazy enough to book this place, for finding that key, for refusing to walk away when it would have been easier, for being you." Marlena rested her head against his shoulder. "We did it together, every step." "Together," Dorian agreed. And as they danced in the shadow of the lodge that had changed their lives, they knew that whatever came next, whatever adventures or quiet moments or unexpected mysteries lay ahead, they would face it the same way, together, with courage, with compassion, and with the understanding that the most valuable things in life aren't measured in gold or dollars, but in the lives you touch, the truths you uncover, and the legacy you leave behind. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories of courage, mystery, and unexpected discoveries. Click to explore with us, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe some secrets are meant to be uncovered.